How's everyone doing out there? Chasing Clarity Health and Fitness podcast. Myself, Jeff Black, Brandon DeCruz, the other host. He just got back from a beautiful vacation. But we're
Literally a couple hours ago.
yeah, I know. We're gonna have episode 48 today: Intra-Workout Nutrition, Nutrient Timing, and Peri-Workout Nutrition Series Part 2. So it's gonna be the follow-up part to the one we talked about last week. But B, let's get into your last 7 days real quick, and then we are gonna get into mine, and then we'll get cranking on this. We had a really awesome, before we start recording, me and Brandon were going back and forth about keto and intermittent fasting and these different things I've been playing with. And Brandon was playing devil's advocate with me. I said, well, fuck it. Let's bring some people on to play devil's advocate, period. So, Brandon's very adamant that we don't sell you all anything or market anything, which I agree. But I want to be able to kind of explain some of the stuff I've done. So, and kind of have that conversation. So it's going to be some good podcasting coming our way pretty soon, expanding what Brandon and I have done before, because we haven't really gone to debate sessions yet. So it'll be interesting. But with that being said, B, how's your last 7 days been now that we're riled up, ready to go?
Man, I'm fantastic, my friend. I literally just got home very late last night, pretty much the middle of the night, because as usual, I had a flight delay on my way home. This seems like inevitable, honestly. Dude. I got to be honest with you. I will say that if I have any luck, it's bad luck. But in all aspects, it seems to never fail that when I do travel, and this is coming back from PEC, coming back from your place, it doesn't matter where it is. When I have a flight back home, I always have a delay. But besides the travel, issues, my trip was incredible, man. Punta Cana was breathtaking. The Excellence El Carmen resort that I was on was loaded. And this was by far the most rest, relaxation, sleep, and resetting that I've done in a week, honestly, since, I looked back and I was really thinking about it. This is the most rest and reprieve that I've had literally since summer break during college. So that we're going back to the early 2010s. Damn. So, as much as I had an incredible time being away this week, it really served as a reminder of how blessed I am to live the life that I do, because I found myself looking back even a few days into the vacation. We spoke about this off air. I'm kind of a person that I have about a 4-day window in which I could relax, and then I need to get back to the grind. And the reason for that, it's not only being a workaholic, that's one aspect of it, but unlike most, I don't have a life or a career which I need to take a vacation away from. You know what I mean? A lot of people, they're looking forward to the weekend, and I love working on the weekend. And so many people, they're living an unfulfilled life. So I feel like they're trying to look for an escape, but I'm really blessed in the fact that I'm doing what I truly love. And I love what I do on a daily basis. And I found myself missing it. So I've come back with an even greater appreciation for my career, the incredible clients that I get to work with on a daily basis, and the fact that I wake up every single day with this intrinsic drive and purpose to learn more, to serve more, and to help clients become the best versions of themselves, both physically and mentally. And I also have to mention, because I received so many questions about this while I was away, so I do want to, wrap this up a little bit quickly on the intro for the podcast, because I know my clients will be listening, as well as a lot of our followers and a lot of the listeners of the show. And a lot of them asked me what I was doing nutrition wise this week, seeing as I was at an all-inclusive resort that had unlimited food. So literally I could order, room service 24 hours a day. I could go to, there was 10 restaurants on the resort in and of itself. And I have to say that I'm probably one of the few individuals, I chuckled when I got back and I weighed in this morning. I had lost 3 pounds throughout this vacation.
Happens to me too, dude.
Yeah. And it wasn't because I was restricting my intake, but it was because it wasn't like I was being super strict or anything, but more so because I'm such a habitual individual, and I maintain so many of these positive habits whenever I'm away as I do when I'm home. So, this is just a little advice for those out there that are traveling, or that, they get nervous or anxious about traveling and gaining weight and all these different things. If you guys keep a lot of the positive habits that you have as a lifestyle within, treating fitness as a part of your lifestyle, as a major component of your lifestyle, you will be able to not only maintain your progress, but also, at times not get that rapid regain that people, that rapid rebound that a lot of people experience during vacation. And I'll just share a little bit of the context of what my days look like. But every day I started with a fasted walk, because that's what I do, even at home. So I got my steps in. I ate 4 meals out at restaurants, but each meal started with a large serving of protein and veggies. So I always wanted to make sure that I hit my primary macronutrient of importance, being protein, which was going to help keep me satiated, stimulate muscle protein synthesis, help with repair and recovery. And then also I got my vegetables in. So I had fiber intake, adequate micronutrient intake, and then I would move on to some of the more delicious carbohydrates and things. But then also, what I didn't do was, a lot of people, they overdo it on desserts and highly palatable, really energy dense food sources. And what I did was, I was out on an island that had the most delicious assortment of fruits. So I would end every meal, if I wanted something sweet, with some fruit, which is highly satiating first and foremost. It's low energy density, so it has a low amount of calories. And then it also provided me with, a great amount of fiber to hit my daily fiber intake. And then also, in addition to that, yes, I laid on the beach and stuff, but I walked everywhere that I went. So, this was just another real world example of why I'm such a proponent of having this high energy flux lifestyle, especially when I'm away and I'm exposed to these hyperpalatable foods, these energy dense foods that are a lot higher in calories than I would normally eat. But I was able to eat more because I was moving more, and it allowed me to stay with an energy balance because of the increase in energy expenditure that I balanced out with that increase in energy intake. So this is just a little food for thought for those going away that get a little bit nervous about being away from their routine. You could keep a lot of the same habits, but enjoy yourself all in one. So it's a way to moderate your intake, but also to enjoy some of the fruits of your labor in terms of taking some of the habits that have served you well and have led you to success within a fat loss phase or within a maintenance phase, or when you're at home, you just merely, try to maintain some of those when you're away, but also you get to enjoy a lot of the, I guess, things that you would enjoy when you were, back at home.
What was the one thing that you enjoyed eating most? There was like one thing that maybe you tried that you're like, oh, this was amazing and worth it.
I'll be honest with you. I've eaten more different types of steak when I was away than I've had in 1 week. So I'll be honest with you. I'm someone that I have, a genetic predisposition to high cholesterol, high LDL. My father had very bad issues with dyslipidemia. He had, heart disorder or heart disease. So I generally will moderate my intake of saturated fats, but I had fillets, I had beef tenderloins, I had flank steaks, I had every day I was having at least some cut of, red meat, which is something that I generally will moderate. So I really indulge in terms of the high-end steak. We went to French restaurants and Spanish restaurants and all over the place, but I really, I enjoyed that aspect. I'm really I'm more of a salty and savory type of individual. Like I'm not too into the sweets. And I also know that if I do end up consuming, I don't like cakes and stuff, but if I got myself a brownie, like it's very hard for me to moderate. So I'm more of an abstainer than I am a moderator. And so I stay away from a lot of the sweet stuff, but I really do like salty and savory. So like a really nice, delicious, T-bone steak or something, like I'm a huge, fan of that. So I really indulged in that this week.
Oh, good, man. I'm glad you had yourself a good time.
I appreciate it, my friend. How about you?
Let's see. My last 7 days were good. I submitted my book to my editor, so that's completely done. I had some like touch-up stuff I had to do after chatting with Steven, bolted that up. Went and got out to a concert Sunday night. Got to see Thy Arches Murder. I've been trying to see them for a while. They're fast guitars, so I was like, oh, that's cool. And then work's just been good, dude. Working on my copper iodine presentation for Coaching Consortium, which is April 22nd, 23rd. Just kind of, it's been very low key, very, how you kind of just the beat just kind of moves. Kind of one of those weeks, in all honesty, man. Not a lot to really talk about. Keegan's on spring break this week, so he's just lounging around the house like a lazy bum. Same with the dog. But yeah, dude, that's about it. I've actually I'm taking my team out to dinner this weekend. So if you're listening to this podcast Friday, it'll be tomorrow, Saturday. But other than that, man, I've kind of really just embraced me going through this prep, because I really didn't think I would ever get to do this again with bodybuilding. Like I really thought I was done. And I have completely new life in my body and how I feel lately. I'm down 20 pounds. So I'm walking around at 175. So I should be
feeling light on your feet.
Yep. But my back feels much better. My hip. I should make 154 at Masters Nationals is the goal. July 20th. It's a Thursday. So I'll be in Pittsburgh. If anyone's around and want to get down there and root for me on a Thursday, I will go in the over 35 and over 40 and see what happens in the lightweight class. You never know who shows up, but I don't know, man. I just feel good. It's one of those weeks, where you're just kind of like, okay, I just checked the boxes and did my thing. And that's always good. So let's get into this thing. So let's recap from last week and kind of go over intra-workout nutrition as a whole.
Absolutely, my friend. So, on last week's episode, we began part one of our nutrient timing and peri-workout nutrition podcast series. And what we did in last week's podcast, so for anyone that hasn't listened, I really do recommend that you go back to that because we covered the topics of pre workout nutrition and the concept of fueling for the work required. And so, that is going to be our initial kickoff to the nutrient timing podcast series. So, if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to that one, please go back, listen to that so that there's this flowing, we really try to do something or do these series in an order where it makes a lot of sense so that you guys are able to take and apply this information in a really worthwhile fashion where it's applicable in the real world, but also you're able to understand a lot of the mechanisms, a lot of the reasons, and a lot of the concepts in great detail as to why we're doing things and the proper order to do them in. So seeing as peri-workout nutrition refers to the concept of what nutrients and supplements we consume pre, during, and after training, I decided to break this series up into three separate episodes. So on this week's episode, we're going to cover the topic of intra-workout nutrition, which refers to the nutrients, supplements, ergogenic aids, and ingredients, as well as the fuel substrates utilized during training to enhance our training performance, accelerate our recovery, improve hydration, and increase cell swelling so that we can not only feel better during our training sessions, but we can also train harder, perform better, and respond to our training more favorably in terms of our ability to adapt to the demands of the work we're doing in the gym to improve our physiques and increase our strength.
Did you get any interesting questions about supplementation or anything like that when you comprised this? Or what was the feedback you got for this episode? Because a lot of the clients that I sent it to, which I sent to some of mine, really liked how we broke it down in a basic approach, kind of like just really did it. What kind of questions you guys? Is this were you able to comprise what we're about to go over today?
No, actually, so I'm gonna be honest with you. I've been off the map the last week, so I had very limited Wi-Fi
Good for
access over the
you.
last week. So our podcast went live on Friday. I was still out in Punta Cana. I had to go to the lobby of the resort itself to access Wi-Fi. So I had about 2 times per day that I would do so. But really, my focus when doing so was to get back to clients. I was going very limited on social media. I did get some good responses in terms of, hey, I really like the podcast. It's great so far, and then shares and stuff. But I didn't really get a lot of questions. So actually, how I divided this up was actually I went back to what is my wheelhouse, to be honest with you. So a lot of people that haven't been listening for a long time don't realize that I spent 14 years in the supplement industry. So this is actually a topic, intra-workout nutrition, which is very much in my wheelhouse and something that I've done large scale presentations to, companies like bodybuilding.com. So at their headquarters about. So really, you're going to hear a lot of the things that I go over are going to be mechanistic underpinnings of intra-workout nutrition that you probably haven't ever heard on a podcast, because this is something that I spent, well over a decade looking into, researching, and applying to myself. And also something that a lot of us have utilized intra-workout nutrition and have seen the benefits from it. However, a lot of people don't realize the goals, the benefits, and some of the research behind it. And this is something that from a career aspect, I had to look into. And it's something that I really think that the audience will get great benefit out of. And I think you're going to learn a lot too, Jeff.
I'm all for it, man. Anything I can learn, I always take. Like we are chatting about all the time off air. I don't know how half the shit works. I'm just willing to always try it. So I like to hear what
Absolutely.
you
And
guys
here's
say.
the thing. There's a great thing about that, because we have people in the trenches like yourself, and also like me, we work with clients, but I'm also someone that I always want to take it a step further. And seeing as this was my career for a long period of time, I do have a background and I don't always utilize it. You know what I mean? And sometimes, it's not that I forget the things that I knew. However, it's just not applicable, or it's not something that we could encompass into a podcast. However, this week, I'm going to take complete advantage of the fact that I spent 14 years studying this type of stuff, and I understand this on a much deeper degree than many. And so I want to be able to provide the audience, provide my clients, provide our followers and our listeners with a deeper understanding and a deeper background on intra-workout nutrition, instead of just looking at this as this flashy thing that some people utilize and go back and forth debating whether it's necessary, whether it's beneficial, or whatever it may be. I'm going to present you with the information. I'm going to present you with some research, and you guys can, decipher whether it's beneficial or could be useful for you.
All right. So then what are the goals of using intra-workout nutrition with that being said?
Yeah, absolutely. So using an intra-workout nutrition strategy can help us accomplish several goals. When I personally include an intra-workout shake into my own program, or one of my clients' programs, my intention in doing so is to help counteract some of the catabolism that comes along with high intensity forms of training like resistance training. And so by using an intra-workout shake, we're able to manage muscle protein breakdown and the cortisol elevation that is induced by training, Also, by providing amino acids and glucose in your blood during training through an intra-workout, you can minimize your body's need to go through gluconeogenesis or the creation of glucose from breaking down amino acids to provide energy, as it will already be available in the system. So you're essentially providing your body with more fuel to utilize and to take advantage of during training. And another goal of intra-workout supplementation is to provide our body with a source of nutrients that are highly bioavailable and easily digested, which is where utilizing amino acids or a pre-digested protein source and a high molecular weight carbohydrate powder are the most effective, as these forms of liquid nutrition are easily absorbed, so our body doesn't have to divert blood away from our muscles to our stomach during training to try to digest these nutrients like we do when we consume protein and carbs from whole food sources.
What are the benefits then of using intra-workout nutrition? Like, okay, so those are the goals, but then I think it's different from the benefits. And is there actually, before you get into benefits, what are the disadvantages? Actually, let me ask that question before you go into benefits. It's not one we covered, but I'm curious, do you find any from where you researched on this, or is it strictly just a pure benefit thing to you?
I'll be honest with you. This is not something that if you utilize that it has any decrements, it has any drawbacks. I think the only thing that we could really look at as, say, a disadvantage would be some of the costs that are involved in it. However, a lot of times people are going to allocate a certain budget towards these things. So I'm going to go over, different resources, different sources of the intra-workout in and of itself. And then you guys can plug and play based on your own budget. However, really when it comes down to it, I work with a lot of individuals. They're trying to get to the next level. I work with many intermediate and advanced clients, and those that are really looking to maximize their body composition outcomes and their performance. And so anything that could provide them with 5 to 10% extra, a little bit of an added edge, is something that they're going to utilize. So I don't see there being any inherent disadvantages except the costs that are involved. However, a lot of people do invest into supplementation in and of itself. So I don't see that being as such a large disadvantage that it would really take away from all the benefits that I'm going to go over.
Okay, cool. Well, then let's get into the benefits then.
Yeah. So there are a ton of physiological, performance, recovery, and psychological benefits that we can get from utilizing intra-workout nutrition and including some sort of intra-shake during our resistance training sessions. So first, intra-workout can help fuel our training sessions so that we can train more intensely, handle higher volume or higher frequency training programs, and push our performance in the gym. By specifically using carbs intra-workout, we can match our fuel source to the activity we're doing, as resistance training is an anaerobic glycolytic form of exercise, which essentially runs off glucose. So providing the body's preferred fuel source for anaerobic training, which is glucose, it provides us with ample energy to fuel muscular contractions, which is essentially what we're doing the entire time that we're lifting. And this not only allows us to have our supply meet the demands of the activity we're doing, but by using carbs during our workout, we're also providing both our muscles and nervous system with their preferred fuel source, as muscle glycogen is the primary fuel source for skeletal muscle, and blood glucose is the primary fuel source for the nervous system. So in order to maximize the performance of both our muscles and our nervous system, we need adequate carbohydrate availability. And using intra-workout carbs can help us manage training-induced fatigue, as it can lower both local fatigue, which happens at the level of the muscle, as well as systemic fatigue at the level of the nervous system. And this is important because of fatigue accumulation is something that not only impacts our training performance within a session, but also our recovery. So after training, so by using an intra-workout, we can help manage fatigue better and ensure that the reason we're failing in our sets is due to local muscle fatigue, like local fatigue in the muscle itself that we're training and from pushing ourselves to the point of muscular failure, rather than from an accumulation of systemic fatigue. And then another form of fatigue that using an intra-workout can help manage and mitigate is central fatigue, as our neurotransmitters essentially compete with one another to cross the blood-brain barrier. And this is specifically important when it comes to reducing levels of central fatigue, as tryptophan is the neurotransmitter that's most linked to central fatigue, as it produces serotonin, which can eventually go downstream to melatonin. So having high levels of tryptophan in the blood can lead us to feeling both tired and experiencing more exercise-induced fatigue. So this is why I like to include or to utilize EAAs, so essential amino acids, intra-workout, because the branched chain amino acids, or the BCAAs contained in EAAs, actually compete for absorption and can beat out tryptophan at the blood-brain barrier to lower serotonin production during training. So another thing an intra-workout shake does is it helps to mitigate excess cortisol production and attenuate the increase in muscle protein degradation and muscle catabolism that can come with high cortisol levels. And so when we really look at it, like the mechanisms of what happens during training, during a training session, cortisol is released to mobilize energy, stored energy reserves to provide us with energy. And one of these energy sources is glucose, which can be liberated into the bloodstream by cortisol to help maintain stable blood sugar levels. And this is also why when we're stressed or when you're stressed or you're sleep deprived, we can see elevations in our fasted blood sugar levels or our fasted glucose levels due to the effects elevated cortisol can have on our blood glucose levels. Now, those are some of the performance enhancing effects cortisol can have in terms of our training. However, with those higher levels of cortisol production come elevations in muscle protein breakdown, which is where we can use intra-workout carbs to not only mitigate excess cortisol production, but also to provide our muscles with readily accessible energy in the form of glucose, maintain our energy levels, maintain stable blood glucose levels, and then lower muscle degradation. Another benefit of having an intra-workout is it helps us to provide adequate hydration during training by increasing both our fluid and our electrolyte intake. And really what this does is it helps us to aid in electrolyte replenishment, which is important because we usually excrete electrolytes through sweat when we're training. So we want to be able to replenish and replete these electrolytes, especially sodium. So this is one key electrolyte that you'll want to use within your intra-workout. Intra-workouts also help us take advantage of the increase in blood flow and nutrient delivery that we get during training, where we can flood our working muscles with nutrients and ergogenic aids and ingredients, because when we're training, we have a massive increase in blood flow that we wouldn't have at any other time of the day. So this is really where nutrient delivery is optimized, essentially. And so another benefit of intra-workout, nutrition or supplementation is it can help us improve recovery during sets of your workout and between workouts, meaning the time course of recovery between sessions can be shortened due to inducing less muscle breakdown and soreness. Another thing that it does is it helps to create an anti-catabolic environment during training, as it helps to replenish glycogen during training. And then another thing, just from a practicality sake, intra-workout is also a great opportunity to fit in extra calories during your training session, which is helpful for those of us in a building phase who are eating in a surplus, as this provides us with another feeding opportunity where we can get nutrients in without having to worry about preparing another meal. So it's from the convenience standpoint, it's really easy to get some nutrients in, get some calories in within utilizing this intra-workout nutrition and not have to worry about making an additional meal, getting a seventh meal if you're already eating six or whatever it may be. And then last but not least, one of the most logical and applicable benefits I see from using intra-workout nutrition is it allows us to get a jump start on the repair and recovery process during our workout rather than waiting until after the session is done, which is even more applicable for those of us who train multiple muscles within a training session. So I'll talk about myself and some of the stuff that I utilize with my own clients, but I tend to use a higher frequency approach to training with both myself and advanced clients, where we train specific muscles multiple times per week. And then also, due to that, we also train more than one muscle group per session. So for example, I'm currently running an upper lower program where I'm hitting 3 upper focused and 2 lower focused sessions per week. So on each of these training days, I'm training multiple muscles within each session. And here's the thing, I get all the benefits of using an intra-workout shake that I just went over. However, I also get to kickstart my recovery for the muscle groups I trained earlier in a workout by sipping my intra throughout my session. So I'll give you a perfect example. Like this morning, during this morning session, I trained lats, I trained rear delts, I trained side delts, and I trained biceps. So when I look at like the construction of my workout, and I do this with my clients as well, but generally when I look at my lat work, which is the first on my priority list for this session, I'm going to train the muscles that I really want to bring up, the most earlier in a session. So it's the principle of priority. So I start with those muscles. My lat work generally takes me between 30 to 40 minutes to complete, but I still have 3 more body parts to hit before I'm done with the workout itself, which generally will take me another half hour or so. And then I'm going to do a cool down after my session prior to driving home. So by the time that I've done that cool down, I've driven home from the gym, I've gotten myself into a parasympathetic state. So I'm in this rest and digest state. I prepare my post-workout meal and I sit down to eat. It's already been at least an hour and a half, if not 2 hours, since I finished my training my lats in and of itself. So seeing as I was sipping on my intra workout during my workout, that intra essentially served as my post-workout nutrition for my lats, while I finished up the rest of my training session I went throughout the course of my post-workout. And also seeing as resistance training increases insulin sensitivity and glucose uptake via GLUT4 translocation. Once I finished my lat work this morning, my lats were primed to take up glucose, amino acids, and the other goodies that I was sipping on in my intra. And since positive nutrient partitioning is increased by training, I'm more likely to transport those nutrients that I'm drinking into my muscle stores of the muscles I was working rather than into fat storage. So I'm trying to leverage this increase in insulin sensitivity, this increase in nutrient partitioning, and also the enhancement in recovery. And I'm essentially utilizing my intra-workout as a post-workout for the muscles that I'm training earlier in that session.
Man, there's a lot there, but I think before I do, I want to ask you, what are the best fuel sources and ingredients to use in an intra-workout shake? Because you're speaking about goodies. We've talked, I think in the last week episode, my introduction to intra-workout was Milos back in the day with glutamine and creatine and EAAs, but then it was BCAAs, but then we're back to EAAs, and then it was intra-carbs, but then it was Gatorade, but then it was waxy maize, and it was all over the place. So what are some ingredients and where can people get good stuff from? Because I know that is a bone of contention a lot out there in the.
No, absolutely. Honestly, you bringing that up, it kind of brings me back. And I was thinking about this earlier this morning when I was thinking of this podcast in and of itself. And I spoke on how I started utilizing intra-workout last week. But honestly, if I really go back and I really look at when I technically use an intra-workout for the first time, my first experience actually goes back into high school. And I used to use, and I'm sure you remember this by Muscle Tech, the product Cell Tech. And that was a combination of creatine, but it also had carbs. But at that time, most of these products utilize these huge bolus doses of maltodextrin and dextrose. And really, at that time, I would drink it intra-workout, but it would leave my stomach feeling like distended and feeling I was going to puke after like hard set of squats. So it really wasn't, I spoke on this last week, but it wasn't until around 2010 or 2011 when I was introduced to the concept of using high molecular weight carbohydrates with pre-digested protein sources by both Dr. Scott Stevenson and the great John Meadows, RIP to him. And actually, one of my first experiences really utilizing a really well-constructed intra-workout was at a workshop. I went to a seminar with John Meadows in Ohio, and it was a two-part seminar, meaning it was both and this is something that you and I, Jeff, have spoken about doing, in the future, but it was a lecture where he did a presentation, and he did, if you go on mountaindog.com, you can actually check on his membership site. You would see like him with the presentation board and him going over all the intra-workout. And he did that presentation on peri-workout supplementation, but then we had a practical side. So the practical side was in the trenches. Let's do a mountain dog workout, which was grueling, long, very high volume, very intense, drop sets, rest pause sets, all these type of things. And what he did during that presentation or during that seminar was he provided us with intra-workout. So he wanted us to see the benefits from it. And it was a great example, or it was a great experience where I was able to see some of the advantages just in one session as to, hey, listen, I'm training with one of the most highly most technically advanced trainees or trainers out there who's going to put me through a gauntlet of a workout. However, I wasn't nearly as trash as I thought I would be, and my rate of perceived exertion was a little bit down, and my recovery was much better than I expected it to be. And it was I attribute that to the intra-workout formula that he gave me, maybe the placebo effect of getting it from John Meadows and things of that sort. But this was really when I started to utilize. It wasn't until I really got the information, Dr. Scott Stevenson provided me with a lot of information behind the research behind it, first and foremost, on the boards back in the day. And this is someone that I've consulted with many times over the years on this topic, but it wasn't until then that I started to utilize intra-workouts on a regular basis without any GI distress. And then I started to quickly notice the benefits from both in terms of my training performance, my endurance capacity, the pumps, and also the decrease in my recovery time course. So when it comes to building out an intra-workout shake, the two most important components of this drink are carbohydrates and amino acids. And this is because when carbs and aminos are taken together during a workout, we can enhance both glucose uptake and amino acid uptake into the muscle groups we're training due to an increase in insulin-mediated glucose uptake, non-insulin-mediated glucose uptake via GLUT4 translocation, and an increase in both blood flow and nutrient delivery. And this allows us to take advantage and ingest nutrients needed for recovery and growth when our nutrient partitioning is at its most prime state. Now, when it comes to the actual sources to use within an intra-workout, there are various, types of carbohydrate powders, and this is something you just hit on. But when it really comes down to it, both in the research and then also in my personal experience and preference, I tend to, prefer highly branched cyclic dextrin over sources like maltodextrin and dextrose. And when it comes down to it, highly branched cyclic dextrin is the highest quality designer carbohydrate in the market, in my opinion. And based on my experience, having spent 14 years working in the supplement industry and having formulated many supplements within this intra-workout category. And when we look at it, highly branched cyclic dextrin is what's called a high molecular weight carbohydrate that has a low osmolarity, meaning it's basically pre-digested and gets right into the intestines, into the bloodstream, so it's easily absorbed and digested. And it also helps to bring out, bring other nutrients and deliver and drive them into the muscle tissue during training. It provides sustained energy, maintains stable blood sugar levels, so there's no crash. But besides highly branched cyclic dextrin, I've also found carbolin to be another high molecular weight carbohydrate that works well from a digestive perspective. But really, when it comes down to it, like if you ask me for the optimal source, what I find works best with myself and with having worked with hundreds of clients over the years, I would say highly branched cyclic dextrin because it allows for more rapid digestion without pulling water into the intestines and GI tract. So you don't feel bloated and distended, which is something many others have experienced with carb powders like maltodextrin and dextrose. And when we look at it, if you think back to these other carbohydrate powders that I'm hitting on, Jeff, I'm sure you're familiar with them. First of all, maltodextrin was one of the first and original complex carb powders. And the issue with maltodextrin is it has a poor osmolarity. So it can cause GI issues like bloating and GI upset. And it tends to pull a ton of water into the intestines, which can cause both bloating and cramping. And then dextrose is actually what's called a low molecular weight carbohydrate powder. So like I mentioned, highly branched cyclic dextrin, high molecular weight carbohydrate. Dextrose is on the low molecular weight carbohydrate powder, which can cause some issues as low molecular weight carbs tend to have a high osmolarity, which means that it causes a lot of water and blood to be pulled into the gut to be digested. Whereas when we look at highly branched cyclic dextrin, it has a more favorable osmolarity, which allows us to absorb it easily in the intestines. So it gets absorbed, quickly, as well as it, passes through the stomach to get into the small intestines and then gets absorbed right into the bloodstream to be utilized readily. The one drawback to highly branched cyclic dextrin, and this is something that you kind of, hit on with your previous question before I went into this, was it's a little bit costly. So if your budget is tight, what I would do is I'd suggest either going with a mix of highly branched cyclic dextrin and Gatorade powder, or even just Gatorade powder by itself, which is considerably cheaper. So I'm not talking about Gatorade in the form that it's actually already in a bottle, because we're going to go over dilution patterns and the solution, the percentage solution that you need to have to really optimize intra-workout nutrition and the absorption of these nutrients. However, you're going to want to use the powder, and I'll explain a little bit more why. However, if you do go with Gatorade powder, you're going to want to make sure it's diluted well and not to use a high amount of carbs from just Gatorade powder, as that's going to cause you to pull more water into the GI tract per unit of glucose than highly branched cyclic dextrin. So you may find yourself feeling bloated if you use a high dose of it. And this is something that I've had many people experience, and I've experienced myself anecdotally, where like you chug a bottle of Gatorade and you get like GI upset, like it feels heavy in your stomach, because even when it's in the bottle, it's not diluted properly. And so it's a little bit too much carbs for that level of a liquid. And so that's going to cause some issues. And ultimately, we want to use something that's readily absorbed and doesn't cause gastric distress, as digestion isn't optimized during training due to being in a sympathetic state where most of our blood is shunted away from the GI tract to the muscles we're working. And this is where using a high molecular weight carb with low osmolarity, meaning it won't pull excess water into the GI tract, is helpful, as these types of designer carbohydrate powders have higher amounts of glucose units in a complex carb molecule, which allows for faster entry into the small intestine, so glucose can make it into the bloodstream very easily. Now, in addition to these carbs, I like to add in a source of all 9 essential amino acids into the intra to help minimize protein breakdown. And there are a few options that we can choose from when it comes to an amino acid or an essential amino acid source. If you go back old school, we used to always use protein powders. And really, when it came down to it, we would use something like a hydrolyzed protein powder. And this is something you could still utilize. So we can use a hydrolyzed whey protein, as it contains both di and tripeptides that are already pre-digested. But the one drawback, or actually there's 2 drawbacks to utilizing a hydrolyzed protein, is they're quite expensive and they have a taste profile that's really difficult to mask. So I prefer to have clients utilize an essential amino acid product that has all 9 essential amino acids instead of the whey hydrolyzed or the hydrolyzed whey. And the advantage of utilizing EAA powders over, protein sources is they're already pre-digested. So they go down like water and they can stimulate muscle protein synthesis just like a whey does, but without the need for digestion. And they also tend to taste great and they mix far better than a whey hydrolysis. So in addition to both the carbs and aminos, I will usually add in two other ingredients into my intra-workout from a base level. So usually that's going to include creatine monohydrate and salt into my intra-workout. So when we look at creatine, creatine has been shown to help with enhancing glucose uptake and glycogen storage. So taking it alongside carbs is beneficial as it will help with resynthesizing glycogen during your workout. Then also, if you look at research, it shows that ingesting carbs with creatine can enhance creatine uptake due to the fact that insulin increases creatine absorption. So taking carbs and creatine together has a multitude of benefits. So really, when you look at the research on creatine timing, as long as you're taking it on a daily basis, a dose that's sufficient for your body weight, and generally with women, it's going to be between 3 and 5 grams, and with men, 5 grams at a minimum. That is going to be sufficient to saturate your cells. However, we can leverage the effects that carbohydrates and insulin has with increasing creatine uptake. And so we're getting kind of like two bang for a buck, essentially. And then last but not least, I like to include salt, which helps with hydration and facilitating glucose uptake and can help with improvements in training performance, endurance, stamina, and energy. And this also helps you get a great pump, which is something we're all looking for during training. I mean, this is something that many people, I get this as feedback from clients. They always love when they get a great pump. And in addition to that, salt is also the number one electrolyte we lose through sweat. So this is something we're going to want to make sure that we're replacing and replenishing around training.
You can lose up to 100 micrograms of iodine per hour with excessive sweating. That's why I'm presenting about my iodine presentation. So you're right about the sweat.
Absolutely.
And working out.
Yeah. So besides including the proper amounts or proper nutrients and easily digested source of all these nutrients into an intra-workout, we want to make sure that we're using the intra-workout correctly to fully get the benefits from it. And this is something that, I really see a lot of people go wrong with. And I get a lot of feedback from clients that are coming to me that are new or that have been under a different coach. And I ask them about their experiences with a lot of things. And I try to look for commonalities or common mistakes. And so I wanted to hit on this because this in and of itself is something that I see commonly done suboptimally, to say the least. So the first thing we need to do is to make sure we dilute our intra-workout properly. So you need to make sure that you use enough water and don't just slam a ton of powder into a small amount of water, like a little shaker or a water bottle. Because if you do, it's going to sit heavy in your stomach and it's not going to digest well. And then it can lead to GI issues. And this is why, there's so many people that have had, suboptimal experiences with an intra-workout product or with even like a pre-workout product where they're just taking it to the dome and doing like a dry scoop, and they're getting GI distress as a result because a lot of these need osmolytes. They need water to be able to work properly. However, they're not being taken with enough water to actually facilitate their effects. And so according to research on intra-workouts, we want to aim for a 6 to 8% powder to water solution to minimize GI distress. And this means if you have, say, a regular bottle of water, so if you have a Poland Spring bottle, which is 16.9 ounces or 500 milliliters, the limit as to how much powder you can add is 40 grams of powder total, which would be 8% of that 50 mil bottle. And so if we don't take enough water in our intra, we won't be able to transport the nutrients out of the gut and into the muscle. And this is where I see many go wrong because they're taking in far too little water, which will result in some of these nutrients sitting in your gut and not being properly absorbed, which is why I believe that some people who have tried intras once and stopped because they've experienced stomach discomfort or felt things like bloating and nausea. And then also they not only felt like these GI effects, but they also didn't get the full benefits from the, the ingredients within the intra-workout because they never got absorbed. So you can't get the enhancement in pumps. You can't get the enhancement in recovery because you didn't absorb it. And remember, we are not what we eat or what we consume. We are what we digest, absorb, and assimilate. So if you're not properly digesting things, you're already creating issues off the jump. And then the last thing we want to do is to make sure that we time the ingestion of this intra-workout shake properly. And this is another area that I see people go wrong because everyone's really into nutrient timing when it comes to their pre-workout meal or their post-workout meal or their pre-workout. They'll take it 30 minutes prior or 45 minutes prior. But when they think about an intra-workout, they just take it whenever. I see people mixing it in between sets, whatever it may be. But really, we want to start sipping on the intra-workout prior to starting the actual training session itself. And I always tell my clients to start sipping on their intra during the warm-up routine that I had them perform when arriving to the gym. And really what we want to do is we want to get glucose into our bloodstream and signal to our body and brain that there's energy available into our system and that we have adequate carbohydrate availability. And starting to drink your Intra prior to actually starting your training session can also help with the absorption, as once we start to get into working sets. So once you get into your more high intensity sets, you're going to shift yourself into a sympathetic state of fight or flight. And that's going to naturally take blood away from your digestive tract and essentially shunt it to your muscles, and that can impair digestion. So what we want to do is we want to have already started the process of getting those nutrients in and absorbed and digested prior to this occurring. And being in a sympathetic state will generally also cause lower levels of insulin. And we want, one of the intentions of this intra-workout is we want to leverage the benefits of carbohydrates. And one of those is increasing insulin to battle or to counteract the catabolic effects of excess cortisol. And so we want to be able to get those carbs in a manner where we're able to increase insulin to provide those cortisol mitigating effects, which will help lower muscle protein breakdown. And that's actually one of the reasons I suggest utilizing insulin secretagogues like carbohydrates or a protein source or like EAAs, which help to increase insulin during this period because, especially when you start drinking it before starting your working sets. So by ensuring that we have the right ingredients, the right amount of water for the amount of powder that you have and fluid in our Intra, and ensuring that we time it properly, we can make sure to get the most out of our intra-workout nutrition and derive all the benefits that it can provide.
I have a question to ask you about a supplement because I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah.
Okay, HMB.
I do not see a lot of efficacy behind it. First of all, it's a leucine metabolite, and so you're going to be able to get enough leucine in and of itself through branching amino or through whole food protein sources, through a protein supplement, or even an essential amino acid supplement. And then also, a lot of the HMB research has actually been thrown out. There is some that has shown anabolic-like effects, to say the least. Let's say they've rivaled that of anabolic steroids, even orals like Dianabol, and a lot of that has been misextrapolated, and a lot of that research has been retracted, to say the least. So there are some labs down in Florida, which was a big investigation a few years ago, where they had made reportings that HMB were increasing lean body mass gains to that of an oral steroid. And it's just not something that I would bother, utilizing. First and foremost, I would spend my money on, because it is a very expensive product for what it is, because it's just a leucine metabolite that's highly concentrated. And it's not something that's going to have real great efficacy unless you are really protein deficient. So maybe if you're a vegan, you're a vegetarian, or you have a very low protein intake, but even for that, due to the cost per serving, I would even say utilize an essential amino acid over that, or utilize a protein powder, whether it be a vegan, a vegetarian protein powder, or even a whey protein.
Fair. I've been playing with it the last 2 years, and I put it in as I got older. And I think maybe in that realm it works, but I do take double the dose. I take like 6 grams. The stuff that they studied was only 3. And I haven't pulled it out in a while, but I actually am going to pull it back out and just see. I'm just curious, but I always like to ask questions because I know if I think it, then maybe someone else will, and it allows for things to be covered.
Yeah, and here's the thing. So the research that was done was utilizing a dose which was sufficient to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So we have what's called a leucine. There's a leucine trigger, but there's also a leucine threshold, which is approximately 3 grams per serving, which will maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And that's going to be based on the composition of the protein that you're utilizing. So a whey protein is going to have a higher leucine content than is a whole food protein source. So within that, we may have to utilize 30 to 35 grams of a whole food protein source as compared to 20 to 25 grams of a whey isolate per se. However, there's a dose threshold to that. So we have to hit that dose to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis. But going beyond that, so if you were to utilize, 6 grams of leucine or 6 grams of HMB at one time, you're not going to get a larger increase in muscle protein synthesis than you would by hitting that leucine threshold in and of itself. So it's almost like there's a dose response, but it plateaus off quickly.
Okay, I appreciate you answering that because it's one of those I always like to ask. What is the research on the benefit of using carbs intra-workout?
All right. So when it comes to intra-workout carbs, we have research that shows how much of the benefit we can get from including carbohydrates intra-workout during a resistance training program. What's really interesting about this is there isn't a lot of research on supplementation in resistance training interventions. And so I really like when we get something that's both ecologically valid meaning there's external validity. We could take it from what the research study showed and really apply it to our sector of the population. So this is one study that always sticks out in my mind, because a lot of the research that we have on intra-workout nutrition is actually on endurance athletes, but this was specifically done on resistance trained athletes. And so in a study by Tarpenning, researchers took a group of young men and put them on a 12-week progressive resistance training program. And in one group, they gave them a non-caloric placebo drink. And in the other group, they gave them a 6% carbohydrate solution. So remember, I said for a solution to be advantageous in an initial workout, we want to look between 6 to 8%. So they abided by that. They did a 6% carbohydrate solution consisting of 50 grams of liquid carbs in the form of an intra-workout shake. And those who received the intra-workout shake experienced an increase in blood glucose, an elevation in insulin, and a reduction in cortisol during their resistance training sessions throughout the course of the resistance training intervention. The research group then correlated the changes in muscle fiber size with the changes in cortisol during this training intervention. And they found that taking in carbs, which helped to suppress excess cortisol levels during and after the training, actually helped with the adaptations to training. So when cortisol levels were suppressed more, there was a greater increase in muscle fiber size. So basically what they found was those who reduced cortisol the most through the use of an intra-workout carbohydrate supplementation experienced the greatest muscle growth. And then when looking at the actual increases in both their type 1 and their type 2 fiber, muscle fibers, so their slow and their fast twitch muscle fibers, they found that weight training exercise with carbohydrate ingestion resulted in significantly greater gains in both type 1 muscle fiber, which grew 19.1%, and type 2 muscle fibers area, which grew 22.5%, than in weight training exercise alone without the ingestion of carbohydrates during training. And the difference in cortisol response accounted for 74% of the variance of change in type 1 muscle fibers and 52.3% of the variance of change in type 2 muscle fiber area. And the thing with cortisol is that it's necessary to the training process, as we need to liberate energy. So I don't want people to think about cortisol as this negative hormone. Like, hormones are never good or bad. It's when they're in excess or they're depleted of. And so there's this Goldilocks range. But when it comes to cortisol, it's necessary to the training process because it helps us liberate energy and have enough energy. But
Correct.
also what it does is it breaks things down. It breaks down substrates, and those substrates can include muscle tissue. And the harder we train, the more cortisol we end up producing, which can lead to having a more difficult time recovering and building muscle. And another thing, that I want to really bring your attention to that was striking about this study was the difference in cortisol response accounted for up to 74% of the variation or the variance in results between different subjects. So almost 3/4 of the difference in results of muscle growth was due to how well each subject's cortisol was managed due to the use of this carbohydrate supplementation. And then even the International Society of Sports Nutrition have included how consuming carbs solely or in combination with protein during resistance training exercise increases muscle glycogen stores, ameliorates muscle damage, and facilitates greater acute and chronic training adaptations in their most recent position stand on nutrient timing. So if you guys are familiar with the International Society of Sports Nutrition, this is like the paramount organization. This is something that Alan Aragon writes for. Chad Kurtzik, Sean Arendt, Brad Schoenfeld. These are some of the most reputable researchers, and they're showing, or they're giving a position stand where they're pretty much putting out their thoughts that intra-workout supplementation with both carbs and a form of amino acids, whether that be protein or amino acids itself, is highly beneficial to the resistance training adaptation process. So these are things that we can utilize to our benefit, especially when building muscle was our goal.
What are the extra tips for those who have limited experience with intra-workout nutrition?
Absolutely. So, sometimes someone will try an intra-workout for the first time and either use too high of a dose or a suboptimal carbohydrate source, and they'll get this negative GI response and then not want to use it again. And I've seen this time and time again. I've interacted with many clients who have come to me and said, I tried that intra-workout thing, got a stomach ache or whatever it may be, and I never tried it again. And my advice to those who have had one of these negative experiences is to take the information provided on this podcast regarding the sources you should use in an intra-workout and how to properly use it, and try it for yourself. And remember, we want to start small and use ingredients known for quick digestion and absorption. And we also have research that shows that our GI tract will adapt over time to consuming carbs during exercise. So if you don't feel great the first time, don't think this is a sign that intra-workout nutrition isn't for you. It just may take some time to adjust, and you should take a slow and steady approach where you titrate the amount of carbs and the EAAs and the total size of your intra-workout over time, as the gut is just like our muscles. So it takes time to adapt, and adjust, and we have to train it just like we do our muscles. And so you want to give it ample time to get used to what you're providing it with. It's just like the size of your meals. You wouldn't go from eating, 40 grams of protein and 45 grams of carbohydrates, and then all of a sudden go to 100 grams of protein and 150 grams of carbohydrates, and really make these drastic increases. And that's really what I see a lot of times with people utilizing intra-workouts. They're utilizing way too much off the bat. They're not utilizing enough water. And I try to really get people to open up their minds to the idea of intra-workout supplementation, and realizing that this is something that can be highly beneficial, but it needs to be used correctly. So my advice with everything I've covered in this podcast is to run a trial on yourself and to try these approaches and see yourself as a science experiment where you test things and you gauge your response to them, rather than being closed off to a new approach or a new methodology based on a previous experience or something you heard someone in the gym say. And that's something that is so common within this industry. You try something once, it doesn't go your way, and you just discard it. And really, we have to realize that there are a lot of these strategies or tools within our toolbox, and it might not have been, applicable or useful or necessary for you your first year of training or when you were a beginner. However, it can be leveraged later on into your training career or in a different phase. So if you're in a dieting phase and you don't have the calories to allocate towards a carbohydrate powder, maybe that's when you just use an intra-workout essential amino acid product, or you just wait until you're in a reverse diet or you're in a building phase. And so another approach I like to have those who are weary about intras do is to use it for a training cycle and then take it out to see how your performance, your recovery, and soreness feel without utilizing it. And I'll tell you, this is something I've personally done myself, and I've experienced a drop off in recovery. So now I don't go into a training session without some sort of intra, to the point where, intra workouts, like I pre-make my intra workouts, and it was one of the only supplements that I packed this past week when I went on vacation, because I knew I was going to train every single day. That is part of my routine, and I wasn't going to miss it. And I didn't want to go without the benefits that I feel from intra-workout, as it's something that I've been utilizing for years on end and have always seen a benefit from. But I also experience a decrement and a detriment from it when I don't take it. So I wanted to make sure it was still in. So overall, we see that intra-workout nutrition provides many benefits, including an increase in insulin, which helps to reduce and mitigate muscle protein breakdown. It increases vasodilation and blood flow. It increases nutrient delivery and transport. It helps with amino acid uptake to the muscle. It can help with recovery. It can help with fueling. It can help with endurance. It can help with pumps. So I encourage you to try it for yourself and let us know how it went. As always, I want to thank you guys for listening to another episode of the show. We'd love it if you would take a screenshot. You would share the show and also tag us in your stories, so that this cost-free educational content that we deliver on a weekly basis can reach others and help them in their journey towards a better physique, enhanced performance, greater fitness, and an overall better quality of life. Jeff, close us on out, my man.
Dude, thanks for presenting a really good episode and all that. I am one of those people I could nerd out and been like, all right, well, here's what I do. What do you think about this? And But yeah, if you guys listen, liking, sharing, giving us ideas that we could talk about, yes, things like that. We all love the engagement. It helps gives us ideas, because, we're 48 episodes in. We got like another 100 plus, if not easily more to go. We'll definitely need all the help, but thank you guys always for tuning in, and B, thank you for putting together such good episodes. But if you guys are looking to find me, I'm Jeff Unbreakable Black on Instagram. I'm out of jail on social media, so that's for the time being. And I'm on YouTube under Relentless Forever. So we've been putting a lot of content there lately. I'm doing we film our first team Q&A this Friday, so I'm interested to have that conversation. But B, where can everybody find you at to close this up?
Absolutely. Guys, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at @BrandonDeCruz_, and then also on my email, bdecruzfitness@gmail.com. I am back in the States. I will be answering 24/7. So feel free to reach out to me and give me any feedback or any questions you guys have, because that's how we create the show. As always, guys, have a great weekend, and thank you so much for your support.
See ya.